So you have decided to start collecting Necrons. In today's video we're going to talk about the new Start Collecting box set, how to build it, how to use it and how to expand it. It's coming right up.
Necrons!
Nick speaking and welcome to this video. Right, in today's Necron video we're going to have a look at expanding the new Necron Start Collecting box set. Before that though, if you would like to keep up to date with the wonders of Warhammer 40k, not miss a Necron upload, then please give me a sub and hit the bell button so you don't miss a video. Okay, so as promised, today we're going to have a look at the new Start Collecting box set. I'm going to talk about the units that you get in there, the best way to build them, the best way to use them, and also how to expand from the models that you get in the box set. So let's go table down and get to this. Okay, so the Start Collecting box set, you get 12 warriors, 3 Scarab swarms, you get an Overlord, you get a command barge with an Overlord in it, which can also be built as Annihilation Barge. You also get some Immortals, which you can build either with Gauze weapons, Tesla weapons, or you can build them as death marks. So that's where we're going to start. We're going to have a look at which models we should actually build. Okay, so first of all, death marks or Immortals. Bearing in mind that my Immortals here are some of the older models. Right, which one should you build? Well, to be fair, they're all good. And that is a great thing about the new Necron Codex. A lot of the units are actually very, very playable. However, let's assume that you're just playing with the Start Collecting box set. Which one do you build? Now it's fair to say that both the Immortals and the Death Marks will work well if you're playing a little army with the Start Collecting set. The Death Marks are quite a nice distraction unit, deep striking in, and the Immortals are a good, solid troops choice with their 3+ save. So regardless of which one you go for, I think you'll be fine. However, personally, I would build them as Immortals. And the reason for that is obviously troops are objective secure. That is very powerful in 8th edition, especially in a small game. Plus, looking forward into the future, Immortals are always good to have in your army case. Now, do you build Gauze or Tesla? That is the question. If you're handy with magnets, you could potentially try to magnetize them. However, what I will say about Immortals with both Gauze and Tesla is that you will probably end up wanting both types of guns in your Necron collection. Both are very handy to have, they both have their uses, and depending on your army list will make quite a big difference to which guns you're going to be choosing, which dynasties you're going to be choosing, and how you're going to use your Immortals. If you're just taking small units of defensive Immortals to sit on a backfield objective, I would go with Tesla. You've got 2 shots at 24 inches. The Gauze weapons will only have 1 shot at 24 inches, however they do have a better AP. They're definitely better if you're being more aggressive with your Immortals, pushing them forward. So it is a personal choice, however I foresee you wanting both units in the future, so I wouldn't worry too much about which guns you'd put on them. However, if it was me and I was playing with just the Start Collecting box set, I would put Gauze weapons on them. We'll talk more about why that is in a minute. Okay, so next is the Command Barge stroke Annihilation Barge. So you get one of these kits in the box and you can choose to make it as one of these models. Now, I would highly recommend that you magnetize this model. I do have a very easy to follow tutorial on magnetizing this model. I'll link you up to the video, top right hand corner, if you want to check that out. Now it's fair to say that the Command Barge with the Overlord in it is a great HQ choice. Give it a lightning field, you can charge it forward, it can do some damage, it's got the underslung gun. Again, make sure you magnetise the underslung gun, because you never know the future and you never know which gun you want to take. But once again, if I was just going to play with the Start Collecting box set, I would actually make that into the Annihilation Barge version. Okay, so now we've made our models and we are left with this little force. This is a great little patrol detachment and I can make it come in at 499 points. So if we have a scythe on the Overlord, the Annihilation Barge with a Tesla cannon underneath, 10 Necron warriors, yes we do have to take 2 warriors out of the group, and then 3 Scarab swarms and 5 Immortals. Gauss and Tesla guns are the same cost, it doesn't matter which guns you have. And that comes in at 499 points and gives us quite a nice little force. We've got 2 squads of troops and the Annihilation Barge. The Annihilation Barge is in there rather than the Command Barge for those extra high strength shots. Strength 7 shots with the Tesla weapons. We have all the Gauss weapons in there as well, and the reason for that is we're going to go with the Sutek Dynasty. That gives us the ability to also advance and shoot our weapons, albeit only 1 shot, but we can use them as assault weapons. That makes the force a little bit faster across the table. Now the Scarabs, 3 Scarabs are not going to do a great deal. I wouldn't send them up the field. What I would do with those is just pop them on an objective at the back of the field, hide them behind a piece of terrain at the bottom of a building if you can. Just keep them out of line of sight, and the rest of the force is going to push forward. And I think that makes quite a nice 500 point army. However, if you didn't want to magnetise your models and you're saying to me, well Nick, I want to build the Command Barge because overall it probably is a better unit, well we can still do that and maintain quite a nice little 500 point army. So let's have a look at that. Okay, so now we've got the Overlord there with the Command Barge, and he has his own special rules like Wave of Command, very useful indeed, and of course Quantum Shielding on the Barge. That gives us 2 HQs, 2 troops and a fast attack. Pretty much everything is going to work exactly the same as before, and we can just about get the points down to 500 points. We do have to make a few compromises. The Necron Overlord is going to have a hyperphase sword, and the barge itself is going to have Tesla cannons. Now I think ideally Gauss cannons would be better, especially if you're taking the Sutek Dynasty. But the army list is going to work very similar to how it worked before. You're just going to be lacking some strength 7 guns, strength 5 being your best gun on the table with this particular list. Now strength 7 isn't particularly powerful in Warhammer 40k, and ideally as we expand the set we will be looking at getting some better anti-tank guns in the army. But as a nice secondary option this can work quite well. Of course you can change those Immortals up for death marks as previously discussed, and that can make quite a nice little distraction unit as well. So it's quite clear that the Start Collecting box set is very usable. We could make 2 or 3 different lists from the set, actually quite decent lists at 500 points. Okay, so that's the actual set itself, but how about expanding it? Okay, so I know some of you who are watching will have the Forgebane box set as well as the Start Collecting box set. I'm going to cover Forgebane in a minute, but first of all I want to talk about, is it worth having 2 Start Collecting box sets? Okay, so now we've got 2 box sets. Now it's fair to say that if you're just planning on having a 1000 point army and you're not going to expand any more than that, I wouldn't buy 2 box sets. However, if you're looking for a solid core amount of units for a Necron force to build on, maybe up to 2000 points, then 2 Start Collecting sets will do you very well. Now if I had 2 of these sets, this is what I would do. I would go back to my first Start Collecting box set there, where I have my Annihilation Barge, and I would actually change the Immortals to Tesla guns. And that's because in this little force they will be the unit sitting on my backfield objective. Our Scarab swarms are now up to units of 6, so those are a little bit better to send out rather than keeping back on objectives. Now with the additional box set we're going to have another squad of warriors. That gives us 2 squads of 12 warriors and the squad of Immortals. If we take one of the Overlords out, use one Overlord on foot and the other Overlord in the Command Barge, that means we can qualify for the battalion detachment to get those extra command points. Now the other unit we've got here is the Death Marks. So in this occasion, where we've got our troop slots filled out, I would actually make them into death marks. That gives us that, once again, nice distracting unit that can deep strike in turn 2 or 3 whenever we need them. Now this list that you see on the table comes in at 986 points, and we're able to get a Warsight on both of the Lords and an underslung gun, which is a Gauze cannon, on the command barge. And again, I think this is a nice solid 1000 point army. You are lacking a little bit in certain areas. You haven't got much assault in there, you haven't got an awful lot of anti-tank guns in there. However, as a core Necron force, this is a solid choice. You could, if you wanted to, change those death marks up, make them into a unit of Immortals, and then you could have a nice big squad of Immortals, bearing in mind that the Immortals all have to be holding the same gun. Okay, so that's if you've got 2 box sets. What I'm going to do now is go back to 1 box set and have a look how we're going to expand it, maybe try to bring in some of that anti-tank weaponry. Okay, so we've got our Start Collecting box set there, and now we need to expand on it. Which models do we buy? Which dynasties do we use? Now regarding dynasties, I am going to be making separate videos on dynasties and dynasty tactics. However, it's fair to say that most of them are actually pretty good, but it does depend on the type of army that you're taking. Now you may have already decided which dynasty you want to play. Maybe you like their fluff, maybe you've painted your army in their particular colours. However, I would say that Sutek probably is one of the better ones, especially the Sutek Warlord trait where you can regain command points. Very, very powerful. And in the lower points game, it's very useful to be able to advance and still shoot those rapid fire Gauze guns, albeit just one shot. It helps us across the table, and I think now with the new big FAQ which has recently come out, I think the Sutek dynasty has gone up the ladder in which dynasties to use. Okay, so how to expand this little force? Well, first of all, we're definitely going to need another troop. We want to be taking the battalion detachment to get those command points. So you could either buy yourself a box of warriors, that will give you 12 more warriors, and 3 Scarab swarms, so that helps your quantities of Scarab swarms, or you could go out and buy some more Immortals. Now either one of those choices is great. However, my 1000 point list that I've been working on consists of a second unit of Immortals, and the reason for that is to keep the points down. Okay, so now we've got another 5 Immortals. Tesla, Gauze, make your own choice. The important thing is we've got 3 troops. Only 1 HQ though, so we are going to need another HQ. Now we've got a lot of HQ choices, but let's stick with the good old-fashioned, or modern, cryptic. So that obviously gives us lots of benefits to RP. If we take Chronometron, we can give our Immortals or our Warriors that 5+ invulnerable save as well. A nice choice. You can then give a HQ an artifact, maybe the Veil of Darkness, or possibly a Voltic Staff, depending on your preference. Now that comes in around 600. You'll have to play with the points depending on which units you decide to go for. Don't forget you can drop the Warriors down to maybe 10 in each. That saves some points. Potentially just drop the Scarab swarms altogether. However, you are going to need to add some extra units to take it up to 1000 points. So what unit do I suggest? Well, I think the best unit to take this up to 1000 points is the Monolith. Yeah, of course, not the Monolith. I am only joking. Do not buy a Monolith unless it's your favourite model. Buy it just for the fun of it. But if you want your Necron army to work, don't buy a Monolith. However, it wouldn't be a bad choice if you took a Triarch Stalker. Now it is interesting that we're talking about the Triarch Stalker because that was the model in the previous Start Collecting box set. I think the new one is better value for money. I think it's more versatile. However, the old one is definitely worthwhile having if you can get your hands on it, especially for the Triarch Stalker. Now I made a very similar video to this one regarding the old box set. I'll link you up to that video again, top right hand corner. Okay, so the great thing about this is it gives us our long range weapons. Now I would arm this with the heavy twin Gauze cannon, which gives us a nice 36-inch gun, anti-tank. Now couple that with one of these, a Doomsday Arc, takes us up to around 1,000 points. You can tweak the points slightly, but that gives us another anti-tank weapon, and we can take advantage, of course, of the targeting relay, because that Annihilation Barge is a Necron model, so we can re-roll the ones to hit if we target the same unit that the Triarch Stalker has hit. So that's quite a nice anti-tank combination right there at around 1,000 points. However, you may not want to go quite so anti-tank heavy, in which case I would just pick one of those units, either a Doomsday Arc or the Stalker. The choice is yours. Okay, so you've gone for the Triarch Stalker. This is our army so far. We've got around 300 points left. How are we going to tweak this list to get the most out of it? Well, the units that I would be looking at as my next course of action, not just from expanding this set, but for the future of my Necron army, would be these, the Destroyers. A great little unit. Now you could just have 3 Destroyers. It works quite well. However, a bigger unit works even better, especially when you're playing the stratagem where you can re-roll the hits and wounds. Very, very powerful stratagem for the Destroyers. Strength 6 gun, coupled with the Strength 7 gun from the Annihilation Barge, and then the Heavy Gauze Cannon from the Stalker. Very nice shooting capabilities for the army. However, you may not want to go shooting, you might want to go assault. And in that case, I would exchange the Destroyers for Wraiths. Wraiths, a great assault unit. Yes, they've gone up in points now, they're quite expensive. However, they are a lot better than they were. You can play the stratagem where you can advance and assault. Very, very useful. A great addition to the force and giving you that assault element. So it does depend on which units you want to play. Obviously that has to come into effect. Play the units you want to play. So expanding with Destroyers or Wraiths is a great way to go. You can expand with other units, of course, things like Tomb Blades, another great option. And that is the great thing, there's loads and loads of options now with Necrons. But that's on the table right in front of you, I think is a great 1,000 point list. Okay, now we're going to have a look at expanding with the Forgebane box set. Okay, so these are the models that you get in the Forgebane box set. So you get 3 Wraiths, you get a sprue to build either the Immortals with Tesla or Gauze, or of course the Death Marks. Now I think ideally you will need to build the Immortals. Again, Tesla or Gauze is your preference, but I would go for Immortals, and we'll come to the reason why in a second. You then have the Cryptic, that's the Cryptic with the cloak, and of course we've got 5 Lich Guard or Praetorians. Now there's quite a number of different builds. Now my models are fully magnetised, both options with all 4 weapon options. I have a tutorial on how you can magnetise yours. Check out the link in the top right hand corner. However, I would recommend Lich Guard with sword and board. The Hyperphase sword with the dispersion shield. Quite a nice unit to have, quite difficult to remove from play, and not too bad in close combat either. Now that little force comes to just over 500 points, so potentially a good bolt-on to the Start Collecting box set. However, let's set them up together and have a chat about it. Okay, so we've gone back to our Start Collecting box set, my variation with the Annihilation Barge there. That means that we can put our Cryptic into that little force, and he can stay with the Annihilation Barge and use his special cloak, helping us regain D3 wounds as opposed to 1 from living metal. Now of course, if you had the Command Barge, that Cryptic moves 10 inches, so you can keep up with the Command Barge and do the same if you wish. Now next are the Immortals, and the reason why we've gone for Immortals as opposed to Death Marks in this particular situation is once again to give us our 3 troops, so we can take the battalion and get all of those command points. The Wraiths are going to sit in this little force very nicely indeed, giving us that assault element. And then lastly we've got the Lich Guards. The Lich Guard are a little bit slow across the table, however they've got their invulnerable save, they've got 2 wounds, they make a nice bodyguard for our Overlord, and they've got some close combat ability. So quite a nice unit, taking us up to 1,000 points-ish. You'll have to tweak it slightly. But I think, once again, it proves that we can get a nice little army from those two sets. And with the massive savings that were available from the Forgebane box set and the Start Collecting box set, a 1,000-point Necron army isn't actually that expensive. And the great thing about Necrons is they're quite easy to paint as well. You can get your 1,000 point army on the table pretty quickly. Okay, so if you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing. Hit the Captain Kirk icon so you don't miss an upload on the wonders of Warhammer 40k. Beam me up!